Captain Jake Rivers never thought his life would end up like this. Just 3 days ago, he was flying his small scout ship through space, checking out some strange signals near the edge of human territory. Now he was sitting in chains, aboard the biggest alien ship he had ever seen, surrounded by creatures that looked like they stepped out of a science fiction movie. The alien guards walked him through endless corridors made of some kind of glowing metal. Their blue skin shimmered under the strange lights, and their silver eyes watched him with curiosity. These weren't the first aliens Jake had met during his years as a space marine. But the Zephyrians were different. They carried themselves with pride, like ancient warriors from Earth's history books. When the massive doors opened, Jake's jaw dropped. The arena stretched out before him like a small city. Thousands of aliens filled the seats, creating a rainbow of colors and shapes he couldn't even begin to describe. Some looked almost human, while others seemed more like walking trees or floating jellyfish. The noise was incredible. Clicks, whistles, roars, and sounds that hurt his ears. Above it all, crystalline platforms held the most important aliens. Jake could tell they were the rich and powerful ones by their fancy clothes and the way others bowed to them. But his eyes kept drifting to one platform in particular. A young woman sat there, and even though her skin was blue and her eyes were silver, something about her made his heart skip a beat. Princess Lyra had never seen a human before. She watched this strange creature being led into their sacred arena and felt something she couldn't name. He was smaller than their warriors, with pale skin and brown hair, but the way he held his head up, even in chains, spoke of inner strength. Most prisoners begged or cried when brought before the arena. This one just looked around like he was taking notes. The war chief stood up, his voice booming across the arena. People of the galaxy, today we judge this human who dared enter our space without permission. He will face 3 of our greatest champions in fair combat. If he wins, he goes free. If he loses, the crowd roared its approval, drowning out the rest. Jake felt his stomach drop. He had heard stories about alien fighting pits, but seeing one in person was different. The arena floor was covered in sand that looked like it had seen plenty of action. Dark stains here, and they're told stories he didn't want to think about. A guard removed his chains and handed him basic arena gear. Leather armor that barely fit, and a simple sword that felt clunky in his hands. Jake had trained with weapons like this during military exercises, but that was just for fun. This was life and death. The first thing that hit him was how quiet the crowd got when he stepped into the center of the arena. Thousands of alien eyes watched his every move. Some looked curious, others seemed hungry for violence. A few appeared almost sorry for him. Jake looked up at the royal platform again. The blue-skinned princess was leaning forward now, stunning him with those incredible silver eyes. For just a moment, their gazes met across the vast space. Something passed between them. He couldn't say what, but it felt important. The arena had different sections, each filled with aliens Jake had never imagined. To his left sat creatures that looked like giant insects, clicking their approval. To his right, beings made of what seemed like living crystal hummed in harmony. Behind him, massive creatures that could have been dragons from old Earth stories roared their excitement. But it wasn't just the aliens that amazed him. The arena itself was a work of art. The walls showed moving pictures of great battles from the past. The floor could apparently change shape. He watched as sections rose and fell, creating hills and valleys for different types of combat. Even the air felt different here, charged with energy that made his skin tingle. Princess Lyra found herself studying every detail of the human warrior. His movements were different from Zephyrian fighters, less formal, more practical. When he tested the weight of his sword, she could see years of real battle experience in the way he moved. This wasn't some soft civilian they had captured. This was a real warrior, just from a different world. The war chief was still talking, explaining the rules to the crowd, but Jake was focused on staying alive. He studied the arena's layout, looking for advantages he could use. The sand was deep enough to slow down heavy fighters, but not enough to trip him up. The walls had handholds that might be useful for quick escapes. Most importantly, he noticed that the arena's designers had created several blind spots. where the audience couldn't see everything. As the ceremony continued, Jake learned more about his captors. The Zephyrians valued honor above everything else. They didn't just want to see him lose, they wanted to see him fight well before he lost. That gave him hope. If they respected courage, maybe he had a chance to earn that respect. The crowd's energy was building. Aliens were placing bets, arguing about his chances, and sharing food that smelled both wonderful and terrible. Jake realized this wasn't just about his fate. This was entertainment for the entire galaxy. Representatives from dozens of worlds had come to watch a human fight for his life. Princess Lara noticed something else about the human. Unlike other prisoners who had fought in their arena, he wasn't just thinking about survival. His eyes kept moving to the crowd, studying the different alien species with genuine curiosity rather than fear. When a small alien child pointed at him from the stands, he actually smiled and waved. The gesture was so unexpected that it made her laugh despite herself. The sound of her laughter carried across the arena, and Jake heard it. Looking up, he saw the princess covering her mouth with her hand, her silver eyes sparkling with amusement. That small moment of connection gave him something he hadn't expected. Hope that maybe not all aliens saw him as just another creature to be destroyed. The war chief finally finished his speech and raised his hands for silence. The moment Jake had been dreading was about to begin. But as he gripped his sword and prepared to face whatever came out of those gates, he felt something new. Not just the will to survive, but the strange desire to prove himself worthy of that. Princess's attention. The arena fell silent except for the sound of massive gates grinding open. Jake's first opponent was about to appear, and his real test was about to begin. But for the first time since his capture, he felt like he might actually have a chance, not just to live, but to show the galaxy what humans were really made of. Jake was being led toward what looked like a prison cell when everything changed. The guards had just started walking him down a dark hallway when a voice rang out across the entire arena. It was so clear and powerful that even the walls seemed to shake. Wait, Princess Lara stood up from her royal seat, and Jake could see her from where he was. Her voice carried some kind of technology that made it echo everywhere. Every single alien in that massive space turned to look at her. Even her father, the war chief, looked shocked. Jake stopped walking. The guards stopped too, looking confused. Nobody seemed to know what was happening, but everyone knew it was important. The princess raised her hand, and those strange crystal things around the arena started glowing brighter. Now her voice would reach every corner of this place. What she said next made Jake's heart nearly stop beating. I call upon the ancient right of claim. Her words hit the crowd like lightning. Aliens started gasping, roaring, and making sounds Jake had never heard before. Some jumped up from their seats. Others covered their faces with their hands or tentacles or whatever they had. But Princess Lara wasn't done. She looked straight at Jake, and even across all that distance, he could see her silver eyes burning with determination. "Human warrior," she said, and her voice seemed to speak directly to his soul. "Your courage has caught my attention. You fight not just for your freedom now. Win this battle, prove that you are worthy, and you will win something far greater. You will win me as your mate." The arena exploded. It was like someone had set off a bomb made of pure chaos. Aliens were screaming, cheering, booing, and arguing, all at the same time. Some species seemed thrilled by this development, while others looked absolutely horrified. Jake could see alien nobles on the fancy platforms waving their arms and shouting at each other. Jake himself felt like the ground had disappeared under his feet. Had he understood correctly? This alien princess, this incredibly beautiful and obviously important woman, had just offered herself as a prize to him, a human she had never even met. The war chief, who Jake now realized was her father, looked like he was about to faint. He started gesturing wildly and shouting something in their alien language. But Princess Lara just stood there, calm as anything, waiting for the chaos to die down. An old alien with tentacles for arms was consulting what looked like a glowing book. After a few moments, he nodded sadly and said something to the war chief. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear. Whatever law the princess had invoked, it was real and binding. Jake found his voice somehow. "Princess," he called out, his words barely audible over the crowd noise. Why? She heard him anyway. Maybe those crystals worked both ways. Her answer surprised him even more than her offer had. "Because," she said, and now her voice was softer but still reached everyone. "I have watched many warriors fight in this arena. They fight for glory, for gold, for their people. But you fight for something different. You fight because it is who you are. That is rarer than you know." Jake felt something warm spread through his chest. She had been watching him that carefully. She had seen something in him that even he didn't know was there. The crowd was getting wilder by the minute. Jake could see money changing hands as aliens updated their bets. The stakes had just gone from simple survival to something unimaginable. If he won, he wouldn't just go home free. He would be married to an alien princess and probably become part of galactic politics forever. One of the guards near Jake was shaking his head and muttering under his breath. Another guard smacked him and pointed at the princess. Even they seemed amazed by what was happening. Princess Lyra's father finally got control of himself enough to speak. His voice boomed across the arena, but Jake could hear the frustration in it. "Daughter, do you understand what you have done? The right of claim has not been used for over 100 years. Once spoken before witnesses, it cannot be taken back. I know exactly what I have done, Father," she replied. There was steel in her voice now, the kind Jake recognized from military commanders who had made up their minds. "I have chosen to follow my heart instead of tradition. Is that not what you taught me warriors should do?" The war chief had no answer for that. He sat back down heavily, looking like he had aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. Jake looked around at the thousands of alien faces staring at him. Some looked curious about what he would do. Others seemed to be measuring him up, wondering if a human could possibly be worthy of their princess. A few looked angry, like they thought this whole thing was an insult to their way of life. But when Jake looked back at Princess Lyra, none of that mattered. She was still standing there, still looking at him with those amazing silver eyes. And in them, he saw something that made his decision easy. She was just as scared as he was. This confident, powerful princess who had just changed the rules of the entire galaxy was terrified. Not of him, and not of the consequences. She was afraid he would reject her offer. Afraid that he would think she was crazy or that he didn't find her worthy. Jake had been a soldier long enough to recognize courage when he saw it. And what Princess Lyra had just done took more courage than any battle he had ever fought. She had risked everything, her reputation, her relationship with her father, her entire future, on a human she barely knew. The least he could do was be worthy of that courage. Jake straightened up, ignoring the guards and the crowds and the chaos around him. He looked straight at the princess and did something that made the entire arena fall silent. He smiled. Then he called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Princess Lyra, I accept your challenge and your offer. I will fight not just for my freedom, but for the honor of winning your heart." The crowd went absolutely wild again. But this time Jake barely noticed, because Princess Lyra was smiling back at him. And that smile was worth more than all the treasure in the galaxy. The real battle was about to begin. And suddenly Jake had something to fight for that was bigger than just going home. The gates at the far end of the arena started grinding open with a sound like thunder. Jake gripped his sword tighter and tried to calm his racing heart. Whatever was coming through those gates, it was big. He could hear heavy footsteps that made the ground shake beneath his feet. Then he saw it, and his mouth went dry. The creature that emerged was the biggest living thing Jake had ever seen. It stood at least 12 feet tall, with muscles that looked like they were carved from stone. But what really scared him was the 4 arms, 4 massive arms, each one thick as a tree trunk, all ending in hands that could probably crush his head like an egg. The crowd went crazy when they saw their champion. Aliens were cheering and roaring in languages Jake couldn't understand. He could hear them chanting what sounded like Krugen. Krugen over and over again. So that was his opponent's name. Krugen looked like he had been born to fight. His skin was covered in natural armor plates that gleamed under the arena lights. Scars covered his body, telling the story of countless battles. When he smiled, Jake could see teeth that were designed for tearing things apart. Jake took a deep breath and tried to think like a soldier instead of a scared human. He had fought bigger enemies before, just not this much bigger. The key was to stay calm and look for weaknesses. Everyone had weaknesses, even monsters like this. Krugen walked to the center of the arena and beat his chest with all four arms. The sound was like drums of war. He said something in his own language that made the crowd cheer even louder. Jake didn't need a translator to know it was probably something like, "I'm going to destroy this tiny human." A referee alien, who looked like a walking lizard in fancy robes, stepped between them. He held up what looked like a glowing staff and spoke in the common galactic language that Jake barely understood. First trial begins now. Fight with honor. Winner advances. Then he got out of the way fast. Krugen didn't waste any time. He charged straight at Jake like a freight train, all for arm swinging. Jake barely managed to roll to the side as those massive fists slammed into the ground where he had been standing. The impact left cracks in the arena floor. Jake's military training kicked in. Rule number 1 when fighting a bigger opponent: never let them grab you. Rule number 2, stay moving. Rule number 3, make them work harder than you do. He darted around Krugen's left side, trying to get behind him. But having four arms meant the big alien could attack in directions that would be impossible for a human. Jake had to duck under a backhand swing that would have taken his head clean off. The crowd was loving every second of it. Jake could hear them placing new bets as the fight went on. Most of them were probably betting against him, and he couldn't blame them from the outside. This looked like a joke fight, but Jake had advantages that Krugen didn't expect. Human reflexes were different from the big alien's reflexes. Jake was used to fighting enemies who were trying to outsmart him, not just overpower him. And most importantly, he had something to fight for now that was bigger than just his own life. Every time he looked up at the royal platform, he could see Princess Lyra watching. She wasn't cheering or screaming like the rest of the crowd. She was studying the fight with the intensity of someone who understood combat. And every time their eyes met, Jake felt a surge of energy that kept him going. Krugen was getting frustrated. He was used to fights ending quickly, with his opponents either crushed or running away in terror. But this small human kept slipping away from his attacks like water. Worse, the human was starting to fight back. Jake had been watching Krugen's movements for several minutes now, and he was starting to see patterns. The big alien was incredibly strong, but coordinating four arms at once wasn't as easy as it looked. Sometimes there were tiny moments when two of his arms would get in each other's way. More importantly, all that natural armor had joints, and joints were weak points. Jake waited for his moment. When Krugen wound up for another massive swing with all four arms, Jake didn't dodge backward like he had been doing. Instead, he dove forward, sliding under the attack and coming upright next to Krugen's left side. His sword found the gap between two armor plates, right where the alien's arm connected to his shoulder. Jake didn't try to cut deep. He couldn't against that thick skin, but he found a nerve cluster that made Krugen's entire left arm go numb. Krugen roared in pain and surprise. One of his four arms was now hanging useless at his side. The crowd noise changed from confident cheering to surprised gasps, but Krugen wasn't finished. If anything, the injury made him angrier and more dangerous. He started swinging wildly with his three remaining arms, not caring about defense anymore. Jake had to use every trick he knew just to stay alive. The fight went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Jake's armor was torn. His arms were bleeding from near misses with those claws, and he was getting tired fast. But Krugen was slowing down too. All that wild swinging was taking its toll on the big alien. Jake knew he had maybe one more good move left in him before exhaustion took over. He had to make it count. He let Krugen back him up against the arena wall, pretending to be more tired than he actually was. When the alien moved in for what he thought would be the finishing blow, Jake used the wall to push himself up and over Krugen's attack, landing behind the big alien. Jake found his target, another nerve cluster, this one, at the base of Krugen's neck. His sword struck true, and suddenly Krugen's legs gave out beneath him. The mighty champion crashed to the arena floor, conscious but unable to move. Jake could have finished him off, but something made him hesitate, looking up at Princess Lyra. He saw her nod slightly. She understood what he was thinking. I yield the victory to the human. Krugen said in broken common language, "You fight with honor, small warrior." I am defeated, but not ashamed. The arena erupted in chaos. Half the crowd was cheering for the incredible upset, while the other half was arguing about how it was possible. Jake helped Krugen to his feet, supporting the much larger alien as medical teams rushed onto the arena floor. Princess Lyra was standing now, and Jake could see something in her silver eyes that made all the pain worth it. It wasn't just respect or admiration. It was the beginning of something that might actually be love. One trial down, two to go, and suddenly Jake started to believe he might actually have a chance at winning the impossible prize. Jake barely had time to catch his breath before the arena started changing around him. The sand beneath his feet began to glow with strange colors, and the air itself seemed to shimmer like heat waves on a summer day. This wasn't going to be a normal fight. The second champion emerged from the gates, and Jake's heart sank. If Krugen had been a mountain of muscle and armor, this new opponent was something far more terrifying. She looked almost human at first glance, pale, thin, and fragile. But her eyes were completely white, like looking into twin moons, and when she moved, she seemed to float rather than walk. The crowd had gone quiet. Even the aliens who had been cheering and placing bets were now watching with nervous respect. Jake could tell this fighter was different, more dangerous in ways he didn't understand yet. "I am Zelenara," she said, and her voice came from everywhere at once. Even though her lips barely moved, "Your mind is loud, human. So many thoughts, so much fear. This will be interesting." That's when Jake realized what he was facing. A mind reader. Someone who could see his thoughts before he even had them. How do you fight someone who knows your every move before you make it? The arena floor beneath them had transformed into something that looked like a giant mirror, reflecting not their bodies but strange, swirling images. Jake saw flashes of his own memories, his childhood home, his first day in the military, the face of a friend who had died in battle years ago. "Welcome to the mental plane," Zelenara said with a smile that didn't reach those white eyes. "Here, thoughts become reality, fear becomes your enemy, and I am the master of both." Suddenly, Jake wasn't in the arena anymore. He was standing in the ruins of his hometown on Earth, but everything was wrong. The sky was blood red. Buildings were melting like candles, and the air smelled like smoke and death. He could hear screaming in the distance. "This is what will happen to your world when we conquer it," Zelenara's voice whispered in his ear. Though he couldn't see her anywhere, "Your people will beg for mercy that will never come, and it will be your fault for being too weak to stop us." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. The images looked so real he could almost feel the heat from the burning buildings. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice reminded him that this wasn't real. It was just in his head. The scene changed. Now he was back in the arena. But Princess Lyra was there with him, chained to a post. She was crying. Her beautiful silver eyes filled with disappointment. "You failed me," she said, her voice breaking his heart. "I believed in you, and you let me down. How could I ever love someone so weak?" This attack hit harder than the burning city. Jake felt his confidence crumble. Maybe she was right. Maybe he wasn't worthy of someone like Princess Lyra. Maybe he should just give up now and save everyone the trouble. But then he remembered something. The real Princess Lyra, the one sitting in the royal box, would never say something like that. She had seen him fight Krugen. She had watched him show mercy to a defeated enemy. The woman he was falling in love with was brave and kind, not cruel and mocking. "Nice try," Jake said out loud, forcing himself to smile. "But you don't know her at all." The fake Princess Lyra flickered like a broken television screen and disappeared. Zelenara materialized in front of him, looking surprised and annoyed. "Interesting," she said. "Your emotions are stronger than I expected. Let's try something else." Now Jake was surrounded by mirrors, each one showing a different version of himself. In one mirror, he saw himself as a coward, running away from every fight. In another, he was a monster, hurting innocent people. A third showed him old and alone, never having accomplished anything. Important, this is who you really are, Zelenara said, her voice coming from all the mirrors at once. A nobody, a failure. Why do you even try? Jake walked closer to the mirrors, studying each horrible image. For a moment, he felt the familiar sting of self-doubt. Everyone had moments when they wondered if they were good enough, strong enough, worthy enough. But then he did something that surprised even himself. He laughed. You know what? He said, reaching out to touch one of the mirrors. You're right. I'm scared sometimes. I have failed before. I'm not perfect. The mirrors started to crack at his touch. But that's what makes me human. Jake continued, his confidence growing with each word. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We get scared. But we keep trying anyway. And sometimes, that's enough. The mirrors shattered, filling the air with glittering pieces that turned into butterflies before disappearing. Zelenara stumbled backward, her white eyes wide with shock. Impossible, she whispered. Your mind should be broken by now. How are you resisting? Jake thought about Princess Lyra watching from above. He thought about Krugen, who had called him an honorable warrior. He thought about all the people back on Earth who were counting on him to represent humanity well. Because I'm not fighting alone, he said. Every human who ever refused to give up is fighting with me. Every person who ever stood up to a bully, every soldier who ever protected someone weaker, every parent who ever worked 2 jobs to feed their kids. You can't break that kind of strength because it's bigger than just me. For the first time in the fight, Zelenara looked afraid. Her attacks had always worked before because she fought individuals. But Jake wasn't just one person anymore. He was carrying the hopes and dreams of his entire species. The mental plane around them began to change again. But this time Jake was in control. Instead of nightmares and fears, the space filled with memories of good times, birthday parties, graduation days, the first time he saw the stars from a spaceship, simple. Human moments that were beautiful because they were real. Zelenara tried to push back with more fear and doubt, but her attacks just bounced off Jake's new mental defenses. She had never encountered a mind that could turn its own weaknesses into strengths. I don't understand, she said, and for the first time, she sounded like a confused person instead of a terrifying mental warrior. How can you be so weak and so strong at the same time? That's the human way, Jake said gently. We're full of contradictions, and that's okay. The arena around them flickered and then returned to normal. They were back on the sand. In front of thousands of watching aliens, Zelenara was on her knees, holding her head in her hands. I yield, she said quietly. Your mind is too strange for me to break. I have never met thoughts like yours before. Jake helped her to her feet, just like he had helped Krugen. Thank you for the fight, he said. You taught me something about myself. As the medical teams came to check on Zelenara, Jake looked up at Princess Lyra. She was standing again, her hands pressed against the railing of her platform. Even from far away, he could see that she was crying, but they were happy tears. To trials down, 1 to go. And Jake was starting to understand that winning wasn't just about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being human, with all the messy emotions and contradictions that came with it. The hardest fight was still ahead, but Jake felt ready for whatever came next. The arena fell completely silent as the final gates began to open. Jake could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. Even the aliens who had been chattering and placing bets throughout the first 2 fights were now holding their breath. This last champion was different from the others, and everyone knew it. When the figure stepped into the arena, Jake's heart sank. This wasn't some monster or strange alien creature. This was a Zephyrian warrior who looked like he had been designed by the gods themselves. Tall, perfectly muscled, with blue skin that seemed to glow under the arena lights. His armor was polished to mirror brightness, and every piece of equipment he carried looked like it cost more than Jake's entire spaceship. But what really worried Jake was the way Princess Lyra reacted when she saw him. Even from across the arena, Jake could see her face go pale. She gripped the railing of her platform so tight her knuckles turned white. Zarthik. Someone in the crowd whispered, and the name spread through the audience like wildfire. Jake didn't need anyone to explain who this was. The way Zarthik looked at Princess Lyra, the way her father nodded approvingly when he saw him, the way the Zephyrian nobles in the crowd started cheering louder than they had all day. This was the man they had chosen for her. This was her former boyfriend. Zarthik walked to the center of the arena with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight in his life. His weapons were works of art, a plasma sword that hummed with energy, and a shield that seemed to bend light around itself. Everything about him screamed perfection. When he spoke, his voice carried easily across the arena without any artificial help. Human, he said, and the words sounded like an insult coming from his lips. You have made a mockery of our sacred traditions. You have embarrassed our greatest warriors. And worst of all, you have confused our princess with your primitive tricks. Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Getting mad would only make him sloppy, and he couldn't afford to be sloppy against this opponent. I haven't used any tricks, Jake replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. I just fought with everything I had. Zarthik laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made Jake want to punch him in his perfect face. Everything you had? You barely defeated a brute and a mind witch. Now you face a true warrior of the Zephyrian Empire. I have trained since childhood to be the perfect fighter. I have never been defeated. I am everything you could never hope to be. The crowd was eating it up. Jake could hear aliens cheering for Zarthik and booing at him. It felt like the entire galaxy was against him now. But when Jake looked up at Princess Lyra, he saw something that gave him hope. She wasn't cheering for Zarthik. She wasn't even looking at him. Her silver eyes were fixed on Jake, and in them he saw something that made his heart race. She believed in him. Even now, even facing this perfect warrior, she still thought he could win. The fight began differently than the others. Zarthik didn't charge or try to overwhelm Jake with power. Instead, he moved like a dancer. His sword worked so smooth and precise it was almost beautiful to watch. Every attack was perfectly timed. Every defense was flawless. Jake found himself being pushed back step by step. His own sword felt clumsy compared to Zarthik's elegant weapon. His armor, already damaged from the first two fights, was no match for the Zephyrian's advanced gear. You see, Zarthik said as he landed a hit that left a burning line across Jake's shoulder. This is what happens when an amateur faces a professional. You should surrender now and save yourself further embarrassment. But Jake kept fighting, not because he thought he could win through skill. Zarthik was clearly the better swordsman, not because he was stronger or faster or smarter. He kept fighting because giving up would mean losing Princess Lyra, and that was something he couldn't do. The battle went on, and Jake was losing badly. His sword arm was getting tired. His legs were shaking from exhaustion, and Zarthik hadn't even broken a sweat yet. The crowd was starting to murmur that the fight was over. That's when Zarthik made his biggest mistake. He started talking. You know this is pointless, don't you? He said while easily blocking another of Jake's attacks. Even if you somehow manage to defeat me, which is impossible, what then? You think you could actually be with Princess Lyra? You think a primitive human could understand our culture, our ways? Jake didn't answer. He was too busy trying not to get killed. She would be miserable with you, Zarthik continued, pressing his attack. You have nothing to offer her. No status, no wealth, no understanding of what it means to be royalty. I, on the other hand, was born for this role. I can give her everything she deserves. That's when Jake realized something important. Zarthik was talking about Princess Lyra like she was a prize to be won, not a person with her own thoughts and feelings. He was listing all the things he could give her, but he never once mentioned love. You're wrong, Jake said, finding new strength from somewhere deep inside. I can give her something you never could. And what is that? Zarthik asked with a sneer. A choice, Jake replied. For the first time in the fight, Zarthik looked surprised. That moment of confusion was all Jake needed. He launched himself forward, not with any fancy technique, but with pure determination. His sword found the one weak spot in Zarthik's perfect armor, the gap between his helmet and chest plate. The plasma sword went flying as Zarthik stumbled backward. Jake pressed his advantage, not trying to hurt his opponent, but making it clear that he could if he wanted to. "I yield," Zarthik said quietly. And the arena erupted in chaos. Jake had done it. He had actually won all 3 trials. But as the crowd went wild around him, he only had eyes for one person. Princess Lyra was running down from her platform, pushing past guards and nobles who tried to stop her. When she reached the arena floor, she ran straight to Jake and threw her arms around him. "You did it," she whispered in his ear. "You actually did it. We did it," Jake corrected her. "I couldn't have won without something to fight for." As they held each other in the center of the arena, with thousands of aliens cheering around them, Jake realized that he had won something far more valuable than his freedom. He had won a love that could bridge the gap between worlds. The war chief came down to the arena floor, looking older but somehow prouder than before. "Human warrior," he said formally, "you have proven your worth in fair combat. By the ancient laws, you have won your freedom and the hand of my daughter." Jake looked at Princess Lyra, then back at her father. "With respect, sir, I didn't win her. She chose me, just like I chose her. And that's how it should be." The war chief smiled for the first time since Jake had met him. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your primitive ways after all." 6 months later, Jake and Princess Lyra traveled between the stars as ambassadors for both their peoples. Their love story had become legend across the galaxy, proof that sometimes the greatest victories came not from being perfect, but from being brave enough to fight for what really mattered. And every time someone asked Jake how a simple human had managed to win the heart of an alien princess, he would smile and give the same answer: "I didn't win her heart. She gave it to me freely, and I gave her mine in return." That's what real love is.